I came home early that night with a bouquet in one hand and a stupid smile on my face. It was Vanessa's birthday, and for once, I wasn't working overtime. I wanted to surprise her, but the real surprise was mine. I heard her before I even stepped into the living room, her voice low, cold, calculated. "He doesn't know I've been recording our arguments for years," she whispered over the phone. "I've cut the tapes to make him sound like a monster. My lawyer says this guarantees half the business." I froze. My hands went numb. The flowers dropped to the floor. 3 years she'd been building a case while sleeping next to me, kissing me goodbye in the mornings. All while planning a legal ambush. I didn't say a word. I didn't even breathe too loud. I just stepped back slowly, quietly, and began planning my own move. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted with your life, stay right here. Because what my wife didn't know, Arizona law was on my side, and by the time I was done, she'd wish she'd never pressed record. This is Revenge with Chris. Subscribe now, because betrayal always leaves a trail, and karma records everything. My name is Daniel Ramirez. I'm 42 years old, and I've spent the last 15 years of my life building something from absolutely nothing. When I say nothing, I mean it. No loans, no family support. Just grit, early mornings, and more blisters than I can count. I own a mid-sized construction company in Phoenix, Arizona. It started with me and a rusty old pickup truck. Today we handle full residential builds, commercial contracts, even some city work. I employ over 50 people, most of whom have stuck with me for years. And I wasn't alone in that journey. At least, I thought I wasn't. Vanessa came into my life when I was still working 14-hour days and crashing on a fold-out couch in the back of a friend's hardware store. She was smart, ambitious, working as a junior paralegal at the time. I'll admit I fell for her fast. She had this cool confidence about her, like she always knew exactly where she was headed. And for a while, we felt like a team. She supported the long hours, encouraged the hustle. When I finally moved into my first office and hung the sign with my name on it, she was the first to toast me with cheap champagne and say, "This is just the beginning." We got married a year later. At the time, she insisted on a prenup. Said it was just smart planning, given her legal background. I didn't think twice. The business was barely off the ground anyway, and I figured what's mine is ours. Turns out she didn't see it the same way. The changes weren't sudden. That's what made it harder to spot. At first, it was little things. Vanessa stopped showing up to company events. She rolled her eyes when I talked about work. Conversations became clipped. Distant, I chalked it up to stress. Her firm had taken on more cases, and she was often buried in files when I got home. Then came the arguments. It always started the same way. She'd accuse me of not being present, of caring more about the business than her. I'd try to explain, remind her that I was doing this for us, for our future. But every word I said seemed to make things worse. She'd twist my sentences, interrupt, escalate. And every time I walked away, feeling like I was the bad guy, it got to the point where I dreaded going home. I'd sit in my truck for 15 minutes in the driveway, trying to collect myself before walking through that front door. But still, I never imagined she was recording me. That every moment of weakness, every word I said in frustration, was being saved and sliced into something darker. Looking back, there were signs. She'd mentioned things I didn't remember telling her. Quote arguments word for word, like she had a script. Once I even caught her phone pointed toward me on the kitchen counter, but she laughed it off. Said she was recording a recipe video for her sister. I was stupid. I wanted to believe we were just going through a rough patch, that we could fix it, that this was still a marriage, not a case file. I didn't know that behind the scenes, Vanessa was building a case, not for reconciliation, but for destruction. And I didn't know that the night I came home early with those flowers was the night everything changed. It was her birthday. I'd been buried in back-to-back job sites for weeks, but I cleared my schedule that Friday. I left the crew with final instructions, stopped by her favorite bakery for red velvet cupcakes, and picked up flowers. She used to love stargazer lilies. I even wore the shirt she once said brought out the color in my eyes. Call me naive, but I believe small gestures could still mend the cracks. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the living room lamp. I figured she'd be in the shower, maybe on the couch with wine and her favorite courtroom drama rerun. But the moment I opened the front door, I heard her voice low and tense. Not like she was arguing, but like she didn't want to be heard. I stopped in my tracks. She was on the phone. I could only make out her side of the conversation, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. "He doesn't suspect a thing," she said, her voice almost amused. "I've got years of recordings, and the way I've cut them, he sounds unhinged, paranoid, uncontrolling." There was a pause. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. Then came the line that changed everything. "My lawyer says this will guarantee me half the business, and once the court hears the verbal abuse, I'm golden." She laughed. I felt the breath leave my body. She wasn't venting. She wasn't scared. She was plotting. For 3 years, she had been harvesting my worst moments, not out of fear, not out of hurt, but out of calculation. I backed away from the door, careful not to make a sound. The flowers in my hand felt like a joke. I walked back to my truck, closed the door, and just sat there staring at the dashboard like it could give me answers. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something colder settled in my chest. Clarity. I replayed her words over and over again. He sounds unhinged. Half the business, verbal abuse. I thought of every late night, every early morning, the weekends I skipped family trips to finish contracts, the deals I lost because I wouldn't cut corners. I built that company from the dust with nothing but my name in my hands, and she was going to lie her way into owning half of it. No, not like this. I drove a few blocks away and parked under a streetlight. My hands were still trembling as I pulled up my contacts and tapped the number I never thought I'd use. Frank Delgado, my old friend, now my lawyer. We hadn't spoken in months, but when he answered, I didn't even say, "Hello, Frank." I said, my voice steady. "What are the laws in Arizona about secretly recording someone in your own home?" There was a pause, then his tone shifted. "Why? What's going on?" I gave him the short version. Not the emotions, just the facts. Frank went quiet for a long time, then said, "Daniel, Arizona's a two-party consent state. If she recorded you without your knowledge or consent, it's illegal. None of that would be admissible in court." My heart thudded. "And your business," he continued. "If you had it before the marriage and she signed that prenup, then legally she doesn't have a claim, not unless she proves abuse or hidden assets." I almost laughed at the irony. She'd spent 3 years fabricating a case based on lies and illegal recordings. Meanwhile, I had nothing to hide. Frank's voice dropped to a whisper. "We need to move carefully. Don't confront her yet. Not until you have something solid. Trust me, Daniel, play it smart. Let her keep digging her hole." I nodded in the dark, my fingers tightening on the wheel. And that was the moment it all shifted. I was no longer the husband trying to fix his marriage. I was the man she underestimated. And now I was going to make sure every lie she told would come back to bury her. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. Vanessa sat at the counter with her laptop open, casually sipping her coffee. She didn't even flinch when I kissed her cheek and said, "Happy birthday again, babe." She smiled, that same smile I once loved, now a mask. Inside, I was on fire, but outside, I was calm, controlled. Every move I made from that point on was deliberate. I called Frank that afternoon. We met at his office and he laid it out. We need to gather legal evidence. Anything she says that confirms what you heard, you document it, but it has to be done right. No illegal recordings, no traps. He explained that while her recordings were illegal and likely inadmissible, the key would be proving intent. Proving she knew she was violating consent laws. And more than that, showing that she planned to weaponize fabricated abuse for financial gain. Frank had a contact, a security specialist who installed in-home surveillance systems. The plan installed cameras in all common areas, kitchen, living room, hallway, but with proper legal notice. We printed laminated signs and posted them by the front and back doors. Surveillance in use. Common areas may be monitored, perfectly legal. No hidden cameras, no shady tactics, just visibility, transparency, and patience. Vanessa didn't even notice them, or if she did, she didn't care. Over the next 3 weeks, I lived with her like nothing had changed. I cooked breakfast, took her to dinner, pretended to argue when she baited me though. Now I responded with silence or vague phrases that couldn't be twisted, but the cameras were rolling and the footage. Gold one night she was on a video call with someone. She thought I was asleep upstairs, but the living room camera caught it all. I've got 3 more recordings edited, she said, sipping wine. They sound brutal. I threw in background noise to make it seem like he was slamming cabinets. A male voice responded, "That'll help. Emotional abuse doesn't need bruises, just enough emotional distress. And you've got leverage," she laughed. "He's got no idea I'm going to walk away with half his company and the sympathy of the court." Another time she muttered under her breath while texting, "Keep pushing him. If I can get one good reaction on video, we're golden." That wasn't just betrayal anymore. That was a setup, a trap, and I wasn't walking into it. I cataloged every clip, time-stamped it, and sent copies to Frank. We created a secure archive backed up 3 different ways. I kept a master flash drive locked in my truck's glove box. It was the hardest month of my life, sleeping beside someone who was actively trying to destroy me, pretending to still be in love with a woman who saw me as nothing more than a payday. But I stayed focused. Every "I love you" I whispered, every smile I faked, it all served a greater purpose now. Then came the final straw. 2 nights before our anniversary dinner, Vanessa left her laptop open in the kitchen. A folder labeled "Legal Strategy" was right there on the desktop. Tempting, but I didn't open it, didn't touch a thing. Instead, I walked to the camera in the corner of the room and said aloud, "I am not accessing her files. I am not invading her privacy. I have nothing to hide." Because I knew what was coming. I knew what she was planning. And I needed my hands spotless when the storm hit. There was no turning back now. She thought she was building a perfect case, but I was building the truth. And when the day came, I would lay it all in front of her, piece by damning piece. 2 days later, it was our anniversary. I made reservations at the same Rooftop restaurant where we'd celebrated our 5th year together. Vanessa looked stunning in a navy dress, hair curled, red lipstick. To the world, we looked like a couple still in love. She didn't know that night would be her last performance. I held the door for her, pulled out her chair, ordered her favorite wine. She played along, charming as ever, until dessert arrived. That's when she reached into her purse and slid a red envelope across the table. No hesitation, no apology, just business. "I think this is best," she said smoothly. "We've grown apart, and it's time we both moved on. My lawyer has the recordings. I'd prefer not to make this ugly Daniel. I didn't touch the envelope, I see," I said, keeping my voice even. "So you've already filed?" She nodded almost proudly. "Yes, you'll be served formally tomorrow, but I wanted you to hear it from me." I stared at her for a moment, not with anger, with clarity. Then I reached into my own jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. Her smirk faded. I clicked play. Her voice crackled from the speaker. Add in some glass clinking in the background. "He always sounds more aggressive when there's noise. I can make it sound like he's yelling even when he's not." Her jaw clenched, her fingers tightened around her wine glass. "I have more," I said calmly. "About 27 hours worth. Plus video. Like the one where you said you're going to fabricate emotional abuse to get half the company." Vanessa went pale, then red, then pale again. "I also have footage of me reading the consent sign on our front door aloud for the camera. Just in case your lawyer tries to argue invasion of privacy." She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. "My attorney has everything I said. Multiple backups. He's already drafted a countersuit, malicious prosecution, defamation, and an ethics complaint to the Arizona Bar Association for your little strategy with your friend David." She froze. "I'm sure the legal community will love knowing one of their own planned to present edited, illegally obtained evidence to manipulate a divorce proceeding." The silence between us stretched. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked, voice brittle. I leaned forward. "No, Vanessa. Why did you do this?" She had no answer. I paid the bill. We walked out in silence. When we got to the car, she stood outside the door, shaking slightly. "You don't have to go public with this," she said. "We can settle quietly. I'll walk away." I shook my head. "You walked away a long time ago. I'm just letting you finish what you started." The next morning, her attorney withdrew from the case. Frank filed the countersuit within the hour. What followed was a masterclass in legal unraveling. Vanessa's recordings were immediately deemed inadmissible. Arizona's two-party consent law made it crystal clear. Without my knowledge, those tapes were illegal. Worse for her, the court took serious interest in the video footage, where she openly discussed manipulating evidence. Her credibility as a witness gone. Her career as a paralegal effectively, over Frank pushed for a full dismissal of any financial claim she made on the business, and we got it. She walked away with only her personal belongings. No alimony, no percentage, not even the house we sold it, and split the equity as per the prenup. But the damage wasn't just financial. Her name started circulating in legal circles, whispers of ethics violations, rumors of disbarment, proceedings for her consultant. Word got out. She applied to new firms. None called back. I didn't take joy in watching her fall apart. But I didn't feel sorry either. She played dirty, I played smart, and in the end, that made all the difference. The court date came faster than I expected. Vanessa showed up in a charcoal suit, her hair tied back, tight makeup, sharp like armor. But the confidence she once wore so easily, it was gone. She looked around the courtroom like she was scanning for exits instead of victory. Frank sat beside me, composed as ever. He leaned over and whispered, "Just breathe. You've already won," and he was right. The judge opened with a review of the motions. Vanessa's attorney, her new attorney, some poor soul who clearly hadn't known the full story, tried to argue for the relevance of the audio recordings. Frank stood. "Your Honor, not only were these recordings obtained without Mr. Ramirez's consent, but we have video evidence of Mrs. Ramirez admitting to manipulating the files for legal gain. I'd like to submit Exhibit C." The courtroom fell into silence as Frank handed over the flash drive. The judge plugged it into his laptop. Everyone waited. And then, her voice filled the room. "If I can make him sound bad enough, I might even get spousal support." The judge paused the recording after 15 seconds. "Enough," he said flatly. "These will not be admitted. In fact, I'm referring this matter for review by the Ethics Board, and your client is fortunate not to be facing criminal charges." Vanessa didn't speak. She just stared at her lap, jaw tight, eyes vacant. Her strategy, the one she'd been planning for 3 years, fell apart in 15 minutes. The court ruled to uphold our prenuptial agreement in full. No business claims. No support, no damages. The house was sold and profits split as agreed. And just like that, it was over on paper anyway. But the real fallout came after. A week later, I got a call from one of Vanessa's former colleagues. She didn't leave a message, just sent me an email. "She applied here, we saw the footage. She's blacklisted. Just thought you should know." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I wasn't out for revenge in the way people usually think. No screaming matches, no dragging her name through the mud. I let the truth do the work. She lost more than the lawsuit. She lost her standing, her reputation. The respect she once demanded when she walked into a room. And when people started whispering about that woman who faked abuse recordings to steal a company, they weren't talking about me. They were talking about her. I heard through mutual contacts that she tried to move to Flagstaff for a fresh start. Took a temp job at an admin firm. Didn't last long. Every Google search pulled up divorce records and ethics complaints. Meanwhile, I got my life back, not overnight. There were still days I sat in the quiet of my house and wondered how I didn't see it sooner. How I missed the signs, how someone who once kissed my forehead every morning could also be plotting my downfall every night. But little by little I healed. I started running again. Reconnected with old friends, focused more on the people at my company. We did our biggest project that winter, an entire housing complex just outside Scottsdale. And I was there every day, boots on the ground, sleeves rolled up, finally feeling present again. There was no one watching me behind a phone screen, no one scripting my words into weapons, just me. Finally free. 2 years later, I remarried. Her name is Rachel. She teaches high school history, rescues old dogs, and makes the best lemon bars I've ever tasted. More importantly, she listens, not just to words, but to silences. She sees people. She saw me. When I told her everything about Vanessa, I expected hesitation, maybe even judgment. Instead, she said, "You survived someone trying to rewrite your story. I think that says more about you than it ever will about her." And just like that, I exhaled a breath I'd been holding for years. Our life now is simple, peaceful. We cook dinner together. We leave our phones in the drawer when we talk. There's no script, no games, no walking on eggshells, just truth. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the worst betrayal doesn't come with yelling or broken dishes. It comes quiet, slow, calculated, disguised as logic, and the most powerful revenge, it isn't screaming in a courtroom. It's walking away with your dignity, your name, and the life they tried to steal from you intact. So if you're watching this and you've been through something similar, if someone ever tried to twist your words, manipulate your truth, or turn love into leverage, you're not crazy, you're not weak, you're just done pretending. What did you think of this story? If you were in my shoes, how would you have handled it? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I read everyone. And if you believe truth always finds its way, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to Revenge with Chris so you never miss a powerful news story every single day.